So
There we go.
There you go. Thanks, Pam. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call to order this July 17th, 2023 meeting of the Detention Facilities Oversight Board. I'm going to start with a roll call. I, Janice Mensa, am here. Reverend Gerald Gray,
here,
Pam Walker,
Here,
Barb Baker, not currently here. James Dom. James Dom,
Volume.
you are off mute and I can see you're talking, but we're not hearing anything.
He's got laryngitis.
Okay, we'll keep going and yell at any time and then we'll know it's working. Okay, I can see James Dom is here though. We'll circle back. Tom Lawson,
Here.
Ornitha Lewis Walls,
here,
Mike Milton,
here,
and Hillary Stuckey.
Here.
Looks like we have everyone but Barb Baker. James, if the sound's not working, you might want to try hopping out and rejoining or just unconnecting your video.
I just got an email from board member Barbara Baker who's saying she cannot get in. And so I'm gonna resend or ask Answa to resend a link to her.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, I'm racing to it right now.
Okay,
Okay, perfect. James, you want to try another quick test?
Well, then, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, I'll just say James Dom for roll call.
Present.
Great. So we can move on to the approval of the minutes from the 6/28/23 meeting. Was anyone not able to review them? Did anyone have any additional corrections that were not already made?
I have one.
Mhm.
In section 4C, there are two streams of thought. The first sentence is about the terms of everybody, and then the conversation shifted, and I think it's missing a sentence. It should say something to the effect of the length of terms that members serve as elected officers was discussed. And then my comment about that makes sense. So there were two things discussed.
That sounds good to me. I see Hillary's hands up.
I got cut off at the last meeting, and all I was gonna say was the terms were kind of terms were unclear to me, because at first somebody had reached out and said something about a year, and then some other things that went on. So I was kind of unclear about the terms on that aspect, but
Is that like an addition or correction to the minutes or a question about terms in general?
I don't know if that was covered. So my question is, what was it covered during the last meeting? All of our terms?
I'm not sure.
Okay, Barb said no, so I don't have any questions then or corrections.
Okay, are you still confused about our terms? Because I can go over.
I
Yes.
was confused because when I was reached out to ask about terms, it was told me one thing and I understood another from our meeting when we first started. So that can be something separate added in, but yes, I do.
Okay, we could probably talk about that outside of the meeting.
That's fine.
Okay,
it was in the letter that we sent to the mayor and the Board of Aldermen asking for that to be addressed, so you
Right.
should have a copy of that somewhere.
Okay.
Barb
I
Burkett.
have another comment about the minutes, and this isn't
Mhm.
just something to consider. It's very normal for the chair only to vote to break a tie or to make a point. That's very normal, but I think you might want to add to the minutes when the chair abstained, because when I went back and reviewed, I had a heart-stopping moment because I thought we only had 5 people when the quorum was voted on and we needed 6, but I realized we had 6, but you just didn't cast a vote. So there might be a clear way to express that, just so we always have the evidence that a quorum was present every time.
Okay, so we'll think about that moving forward. And the
Yeah.
the first correction about changing that sentence. Is Ophelia on here? Ophelia? I see. Why don't we just table these minutes until next time?
I'm on here.
Hi, Ophelia. I
Hi,
think,
Chair.
hi. I think Barb Burkett sent the correction she was talking about in an email. So why don't we make that correction and we'll just approve it next meeting?
Oh,
Or Ruby?
I had spoken with Barb about that, and we have no objection to her correction if she wants to just,
Okay, we can get that done.
yeah, and then we
Okay.
could go. If the board would not mind approving those minutes with her suggested corrections, that way you don't have to revisit them.
Right. So why don't, if someone can make a motion to approve the minutes of the 6/28/23 meeting as corrected, then we can get this done.
I move the approval of the minutes of 6/28/23 with the necessary corrections.
Do we have a second?
I second.
We'll take a roll call vote. Reverend Gray,
Yes.
Pam Walker,
Yes.
Barb Baker. I'm not sure if,
Yes.
okay, great.
Yes.
Thanks. James Dom. Shucks, Steve, we couldn't hear you again. Try it, James. We can't hear you. I'm kind of thinking that it's trying to block out background noise and it's just hearing your like short spurts as background noise. Can you try saying a sentence?
I'll vote aye on that. So.
Okay, perfect. I think if you just, that's a setting we can like work out later, but if you can just say a sentence instead of a word, that'll work. Tom Lawson.
Aye.
Ornitha Lewis Walls.
Aye.
Mike Milton.
Aye.
And Hillary Stuckey.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are approved as corrected. We're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is the public comment session. For the public, if you weren't here at our last meeting, or possibly the one before, we had a suggestion from a member of the public about making public engagement easier. So we're going to have public comment here for about 10 minutes, and then at a later point in the meeting around 6:20 p.m. for about 10 minutes. So how this works is if you raise your hand, we'll call on you in the order that we see your hands raised, or you come off of mute, and you'll have 3 minutes to make a comment or ask us questions and for us to reply. So if you could just kind of account for how long you think we might answer into those 3 minutes, that would be very helpful. Okay, do we have any members of the public that would like to speak? If you could come off mute or use the hand emoji. I'll give it a minute or two, otherwise we're going to move on and we'll circle back at the end. Going once. Going twice. Okay, hopefully we'll see you at 6:20. So the next item on the agenda is chair nominations and vote. So I gave us about 15 minutes here. Well, we actually have till 5:40 since we're somehow running ahead of time. So my term ends, or I'll have been chair a year around about now / at our next meeting. So at our last meeting, we talked about doing a vote for chair. We actually didn't talk about a vote for the other officer positions, vice chair and secretary. I'm not sure what provisions we have in our rules and procedures for that. Barb Burkett, do you have that info? Or if you could
I believe the relevant ordinance section, and I've got the ordinance here, I believe that it applied to all of the officers. Is that responsive? I will locate that and read it.
Okay. While Barb locates that, just restating the procedure that we followed last time was nominate someone, then that nomination needs, or actually, I don't think it does need a second. You could just nominate someone and then they can choose to accept the nomination or not. And then after we get all the nominations, a little bit of a discussion and then a vote.
Chair, once
Yeah.
Bob gives us the ordinance requirement, I'd like to make a motion.
Sure. I'm also thinking what order we should do the vote in.
My
guess-
motion might, Chair, answer that question.
Okay, cool.
It might be quick. Oops. Here we go.
Okay, I'm looking at 71430, your enabling ordinance, and section 4C provides the DFOB shall elect a chairperson, vice chairperson, and secretary at their initial meeting and annually thereafter, except when otherwise required. DFOB officers shall, again, serve 1-year terms and shall not serve for more than 2 consecutive 1-year terms in the same position, but may be re-elected to the position after a break in service of not less than 12 months, provided, however, officers elected to fill a vacancy for the remainder of an officer's unexpired term shall be allowed to complete 2 consecutive 1-year terms. So I think they're treating all of the offices equally.
Okay, sounds good. Reverend Gray, you're up.
So I'd like to make a motion, Chair, that we propose a slate and that slate constitute the people in the 3 positions. I don't want to say maintain the status quo because I think that's an awful motion, but I'd like to move that the 3 officers, the people in the current offices be sustained for another year. And if the motion carries, then we can just move on. And if it doesn't, then we can go individually. But I like to kind of I like to put that in the form of a motion. And then if it's moved, then we can move on. If it's not, then we can do it individually. So that's my motion, Chair.
Okay,
I second that motion, Reverend Gray motion.
okay, I hear a second. We'll do a brief discussion. I'll start this discussion off, so I think it'll make it quick. I don't want to be chair again. So
Now, we had this discussion, Chair, at the
That's
last
sweet.
meeting. You didn't see?
We did.
Let me take my video off so that you don't see my face.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna take it off so you don't see my face because I'm frowning, and I don't want you to see me frowning because we had this
You're a
discussion,
frown.
which is why I made this motion, Chair.
Mm-hmm. I feel like you might be misremembering that discussion. Because I'm pretty sure I said, unless at all costs I had to be chair, then maybe I would, probably, maybe.
Well, my motion was based upon the all cost statement. I was basing my motion on.
Well, thankfully, it's not come to that.
All right, I'm gonna come back on the screen now because I didn't.
Welcome back.
All right, so based upon you saying you don't want to be chair, then I will withdraw my motion.
Okay.
Okay.
I think the idea of a slate is interesting, but I'm up to the board, of course, but I'm not sure with that in mind. Doing a slate will work more efficiently than just doing it one by one, starting with chair, vice chair, then secretary.
But then can I ask a question on my motion then, Chair? Then based upon what you said, if the board, because Barbara did not withdraw her second, so it's still,
Okay,
it's the motion's still on. Because she didn't, thank you for not withdrawing your second yet. Because it gives me a second kick at this can.
okay.
Then if you're saying that I heard you say you're willing to step down, but I also heard you say, if the board approves the motion I made, you'll serve. I just want to be clear because I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Sure, I will clarify. I wasn't saying the second one. I will not serve.
I'm going back into darkness. 'Cause
I
you-
will, however, we haven't gotten a response on whether or not I'm being renewed at all as a board member, but I am interested on staying on the board, and I would be more than interested in sharing the knowledge that I've gained as chair and possibly supporting in another officer position if that's the way that it goes.
All right, that's fair. That's
Okay,
fair. Then I do officially withdraw my motion. And I guess if I withdraw it, then the seconder, it doesn't need to be a second. All right, I withdraw my motion, Chair,
okay.
reluctantly.
Tom, I see your hand. I also saw your cat, which is beautiful.
Yeah, gets a little nosy sometimes. I would like to nominate Reverend Gray as chair. And Janet, if you're looking to be on the officer area, I'm fully supportive of that too. But I think Reverend Gray would be a great person to step into your shoes and keep the integrity that we have going.
We have one nomination. Again, I don't believe we need seconds, so we'll just get all the nominations in and then we'll take a vote. So are there any other nominations for chair?
Wow.
Going once. I hope that you all thought about this over the month, like I mentioned last time. Going twice. Okay, I feel like we don't really need a discussion then, but let's go ahead and, I don't know, codify, ratify, make it official with a vote.
Well, first of all, I do accept the nomination, Chair.
Okay.
Great, humbly and graciously, I do appreciate the nomination. I want to make this clear that my motion to maintain the current slate was sincere. I think you've done an excellent job with what we were given. I think that you have brought us to a great, I think as a board, you've brought us to a good place considering all of the obstacles and the barriers and the misunderstandings and the miscommunications and everything else. Under your leadership, I think that this board is in an excellent position to move forward effectively. And so I want to accept the nomination, but in doing that, I want to make it very clear how I feel about you and your leadership.
Thank you.
I second and third and fourth that.
And fifth.
And six.
Thank you all. So let's go ahead with a vote, or I guess let's do a motion to make Reverend Gray chair, and then we'll take a second, then we'll vote. Why doesn't the nominator, Tom?
Well, I nominate Reverend Gray as our next chair.
Or could you make a motion?
Oh, I motion that we elect Reverend Gray as our next chair.
You have a second?
I second.
we'll go ahead and take a roll call vote. Reverend Gray.
Abstain.
Okay, I was just making sure we have a quorum since I'm also abstaining. Pam Walker,
Yes.
Barb Baker,
Yes.
James Dom, you gotta give us a sentence. Oh no, it didn't work.
You did.
James, are you on your computer? Okay, where you see the mute, can you click that little up arrow? And then can you go to audio settings? Are you there? And then can you click under audio profile? It'll say background noise suppression. And then can you turn it to low? And then try talking. Are you talking? Okay, can you try the original sound for musicians? And then try talking. Are you talking? Well, we're not hearing. Okay, did you ever try exiting and rejoining? Okay, if you can try that, and if that doesn't work, if you could try using the phone number to call in instead of doing the video. Okay.
Chair, before he leaves, just in case,
Mhm.
just a recommendation, could he give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on the motion? Would that visual be acceptable for the record?
Yeah, okay, so James Dom, great, thank you. Tom Lawson,
Yes.
Ornitha Lewis Walls,
Yes.
Mike Milton,
Yes.
Larry Stuckey.
Yes.
Okay, unanimous. Vice Chair Gray, you are now Chair Gray.
I understand that that takes effect at the next meeting is my understanding, Chair.
Correct.
Okay.
Unless you want to run this tight schedule.
No.
Okay.
No. Thank you for trying that. Thank you for trying it. Once again, it shows that you're still you're still thinking, you're still clicking. But no, thank you. Next meeting will be fine. Thank you,
Okay,
everyone.
great. Let's go ahead and take nominations for Vice Chair.
I nominate Mike Melton for vice chair. I make a motion.
Mike Milton, do you accept this nomination?
Bob Burke, Bob Baker, I love you so much, but absolutely not. Thank you so much.
Mike, you didn't have to say absolutely. Mike. You didn't have to do
Right,
that. You didn't have to do that, Mike. You didn't have
You
to do
actually,
that.
you know, I think when we had the first meeting and there were nominations for chair, that Barb Baker might have said absolutely not. I'm pretty sure about that.
Keeping the tradition.
Yeah.
And if I didn't, I meant it. Well, my second person would be Tom Lawson.
Okay, you could do 2 nominations. Tom, do you accept?
I'm teaching a bunch of AP classes this year, which is new for me. And
Gotcha.
so I'll probably be working 80 hours weeks and stuff. So
Ooh,
yeah, timing's not the best for that.
I
Thank
feel
you
it.
though.
Okay.
That's it.
Hey,
Other-
can I offer, I mean, I like the way y'all work together. Janice, would you be willing to consider vice chair before I nominate you?
Yes.
Yeah, I would nominate Janice.
No, I'm just kidding.
I
I'm just
second
kidding. You
that
do
one.
accept.
I'll second that one.
Okay, do we have any other nominations?
I move the nominations come to a close.
I second.
Okay, why don't we do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Motion passes. Okay, so we have myself. Oh, was that it? Did everyone else say no?
Everybody said yes.
I mean, to their nominations.
This, you're the vice chair.
Okay, so we'll just do another, if someone could motion to elect me vice chair.
I motion to elect Janice as vice chair.
I
Second.
second.
Okay.
Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Daryl, sorry, Reverend
It's
Gray,
okay. It's okay. Yes.
Pam Walker,
Yes.
Barb Baker,
Yes.
James Dom.
Yes, assuming you can hear me.
I heard something. Let's go with the thumbs up. But also, could you try the phone call? Because for the rest of this, we're gonna want like discussion for these other points. Tom Lawson,
Yes.
Renita Lewis Walls,
Yes.
Mike Milton,
Absolutely, yes.
and Hillary Stuckey. Oh, Hillary, no. Could you say it again? I didn't hear it.
Yes.
Okay, great. I thought we were gonna have another audio issue.
Oh.
Okay, great. So motion passes. We've got chair and vice chair down. Next is secretary.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to nominate
Wait,
Pam Walker.
sorry. Could instead of a motion, could you just make a nomination so we don't have to?
I nominate Pam Walker.
Great. So we don't need a second for that, and we don't need to vote for that. Any other nominations? Or do you accept Pam?
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't miss you and Reverend Gray for anything in the world.
I think that's lukewarm. I think you should have given us a Mike Milton. Absolutely, yeah.
Any other nominations for secretary?
I move the nominations come to a close.
I second.
Okay, voice call vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any opposed, say no. Awesome. It passes. And we'll go ahead and take a motion to elect or to retain Pam Walker as secretary.
I move that Pam Walker be, I don't know how to put this. Based upon the chair's statement, I move that the board retain Ms. Pamela Walker as secretary.
We have a second.
I
I second.
We'll take a roll call vote. Reverend Gray,
Yes.
Pam Walker,
Abstain.
Barb Baker,
Yes.
James Dom, Tom Lawson,
Yes.
Renita Lewis Walls,
Yes.
Mike Milton,
Yes.
and Hillary Stuckey.
Yes.
Motion passes. So we've got next meeting's officers. Reverend Gray as chair, myself as vice chair, and Pam Walker as secretary. Okay.
Excuse me, Chair, for purposes of the minutes, did we get a vote from member Dom?
Yes, we got a thumbs
I
up.
voted, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I voted aye, yes. Aye on all three members.
Thanks, Ruby. Okay, still ahead of time. Oh, Reverend Gray and Pam, if you're interested, I think we should try to meet together to discuss things.
I agree.
Yeah, sometime. If the next meeting is just about training, we probably don't need to meet. We don't like absolutely need to meet before then, but if, before at some point. Maybe we'll do a coffee.
I think that makes sense.
Cool. Let's see. So we'll move on to the next item of the agenda, which is Interim Public Safety Director Charles Coyle's response to our call for the resignation of the warden, Jennifer Clemens Abdullah. Did everyone get a chance to read the response?
Yes.
Or
I didn't.
you didn't?
I don't remember seeing it.
Neither.
Did anyone? Oh gosh. Okay, who else didn't see it? Because I'm wondering if
I'm not a voter, but just throwing it out there that I didn't see it.
okay, let me forward this out to everyone.
Yeah, because I'm not sure if I don't remember seeing it either.
Or actually, Ophelia, or if there's another point person on staff, could you forward Coyle's response to everyone?
Okay,
Thank you.
I'm here. Mhm.
And as a matter, Chair, as a point of information, he did put it on the public safety website.
Okay.
So it's on their website. The
Do you know
response.
why? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can probably table a more serious discussion for next time, once everyone can review the letter fully. I will say, in a bit of a recap, what I remember from it was essentially that no, well, first is first.
Janice, can I offer that someone reads the letter? I think it's good for the public.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Let me pull it up. Or what would be terrific if Answar, are you host?
Yes, I am.
If someone can somewhat easily share their screen with the letter up, that would be great. Otherwise, I will pull it up and read from it. It's a bit lengthy.
Could you just read it, Janice?
Okay, sure. Okay, let's see. Okay, so this response is from Director Coyle. To clarify for the public, our request was to Director Coyle and to the mayor. We set a deadline of the end of June, and the response was sent from Director Coyle on June 30th. I'll go ahead and read it. Dear Chair Janice Mensah and members of the Detention Facility Oversight Board, I am in receipt of your letter dated June 5th, 2023. Please accept the following as the response to your letter. I believe that the Detention Facilities Oversight Board, DFOB, is committed and eager to carry out the task that the ordinances 71430 and 71647 passed by the Board of Aldermen have required of them. I believe that this commitment is equally shared across the administration. Where I think we have misalignment is in our shared understanding of what the ordinances require. It does not appear that the DFOB received clear information from the previous Oversight Board Commissioner regarding what steps were being taken to facilitate the board's work and what requirements had not yet been met. I would like to correct this and move quickly with the board so that you can serve effectively. I was appointed Interim Director of Public Safety on February 13th, 2023. When I began in this role, I asked the then Commissioner of the Civilian Oversight Board, Matt Brummond, to provide several items related to the execution of the board's duties, including a copy of the ordinance for both Civilian Oversight Board, COB, and DFOB, requested in late January, and a draft of procedures, rules, and protocols requested in late February. The first week of April, I required Commissioner Brummond and Commissioner Clemens Abdullah to begin meeting monthly to resolve any disagreements regarding the procedures, rules, and protocols for the DFOB. The ordinance creating the DFOB required all members to complete orientation training on 11 different topics. At the end of April, I requested an update on the status of board orientation, including training completed, not yet completed, and the rationale for the delays. Mr. Brummond's response blamed the delays on the DOC commissioner and indicated that he was awaiting opinions from the city councilor's office, which he received. The city councilor is the legal counsel for all the departments, divisions, and boards highlighted in the ordinance, including the circuit attorney. The DOC commissioner is only responsible for conducting one of the 11 required DFOB orientation trainings. In April 2023, in a meeting with myself and the DOC commissioner, Commissioner Brummond requested this training, which was subsequently held on May 9th and 10th. Only one DFOB member attended. On May 17th, 2023, Commissioner Brummond then submitted a short one-line resignation letter indicating that his last day would be May 31st, 2023. All of this information, in my view, is essential context for the board to understand. There was a roadmap for success and good intentions to accomplish that mission. The DFOB was established in June of 2022, and a preliminary injunction enjoined the DFOB for approximately 30 days. On October 9th, 2022, I'm at the top of the second page on SMART. On October 9th, 2022, the injunction was modified, giving the DFOB approval to continue working. The DFOB has had just under a year to complete the 11 trainings required by the ordinance to become an effective and activated board, but to date has only completed 2 to 3 trainings. In terms of procedure development, the DFOB is required to develop procedures and rules and protocols in consultation with the Commissioner of Corrections, the City Councilor, and the Director of Personnel. To date, no consultation has taken place with the above referenced stakeholders to meet the requirements of the ordinance. Both of these areas create risk for the detainees and the City of St. Louis. This is in no way blaming the board members for this oversight. However, the DFOB was not in a position to request and or receive the access and information it requested from the Commissioner of Corrections. The DFOB cannot become effective or activated until the above conditions are met. Your letter to me requested that I ask Commissioner Clemens Abdullah for her resignation. The Corrections Commissioner has experience with civilian oversight directly from her involvement with the federal corrections systems and has not acted to obstruct the process of this board. If the Commissioner had provided the access and information the board requested, the Commissioner may have been in violation of the detainees' rights, employees' rights, and misuse of other protected information and material. Commissioner Clemens Abdullah has 46 specialized certificates of leadership training within corrections, experience working for the Department of Justice's Federal Bureau of Prisons, and experience across the US with 9 different institutions. I will not be asking for her resignation. I will, however, be directly involved in ensuring that both the Commissioner of Corrections and the Commissioner of Civilian Oversight work to get this board what it needs to function. We stand ready to pull these meetings together and formulate the needed procedures to activate and support the DFOB. From the board, we need your availability to train and a willingness to get that work done. Nicole Barton, who previously served as the Commissioner of Civilian Oversight and currently works as the Executive Director of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, will be assisting to facilitate this training. I believe in the need for oversight boards, and I am looking forward to DFOB achieving the requirements to operate. I believe that many on the DFOB want to do the right thing and have no other agenda. Let's get to work together. Sincerely, him. So I bring this up, I suppose, for obvious reasons. One, that we've asked something of Director Coyle and of the mayor, and they've not done it. 2, that the letter, in my opinion, was full of misleading statements, outright lies, and
blame shifting.
Yes. Also, I would say a poor defense for not asking the warden to resign, let alone no mentions of the actual conditions of the jail. So I think that I wanted to bring this up so that the board could discuss next steps on this. I just want to be cognizant of times. Let me take a quick check on our agenda. Where'd you go? Okay, so we're at 5:40. Okay, so we have another 10 minutes to discuss this. I think it might make sense to possibly put this to a committee to coordinate a response, or to make some kind of motion at the end of these 10 minutes so that we can make sure we have an action item. But I do want to open it up to discussion.
Chair, I would like to say, for the record, that I don't view the response as credible. For me, for the simple fact that I would have liked the interim public safety director to at least respond to the, I'll use the word allegation, the allegations that were made as relates to the 8 points of failures that were identified by this board. I understand the rest of the content. I understand that everybody has a role and responsibility, including the former commissioner, who's not here to defend himself. So I don't think it's fair for us to discuss the former commissioner in his absence. I don't think that anyone is unaware of the awards and citation and former work experience of the current commissioner for corrections. That was never in dispute. What this board proposed to the interim public safety director was a set of what we considered to be statements based upon the information or lack of information presented or provided to us. And I wish that Mr. Coyle, Director Coyle, would have at least looked at these 8 issues that we presented and responded to those issues rather than just giving a blanket statement that he was not going to call for the resignation. That would be my brief and only comment regarding the letter.
Thank you.
I feel like no matter what we come with or how we come, the main thing they're going to keep holding about us not having these trainings. So we need to get the training under our belt, because as long as they got a weapon to fight us with, they're going to continue to use that weapon to fight us with. We need to get the training, because they trying to make like that's the whole thing why we have been allowed access to anything, because we haven't gotten this training. So we need to get our trainings and go from there, because that's whatever way we come, that's what they're going to keep throwing back at us about the training that we need to do the job that we've been assigned to do.
Thank you, Barb. I don't want to be too much of a stickler for order, but for the sake of time and getting to the training, if for these discussions, you could ask for the floor and I could give it to you, that would be helpful. I want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak first and then second before we move on. So thank you, Barb. Would anyone else like the floor?
I like the floor for a second.
Yeah, Mike.
I mean, Reverend Gray, thank you for, those words were absolutely my thoughts too. It was a pivot away from what we had raised in the letter, the 8 points to 9 points, absolutely did not answer those questions. But I want to read a section from this article really quickly in response that was written in the Post-Dispatch about this. This happened last week. But one, it has a response from the former commissioner, which I think is helpful. He said,
sorry, Mike.
Yeah,
could you provide the title and the author of that?
Yes, it was by Taylor Harris, and the title was St. Louis Top Public Safety Officials Pick Sides in Jail Oversight Board's Fight to Investigate.
Thanks.
And so one part it says, this came from former Commissioner Burton. He said, no one likes oversight. No one likes to be audited. I get that. No one likes referees, but I wasn't expecting opposition internally from the city council's office, as if he witnessed it, and my own public safety director. I wasn't expecting that. Then he goes on to say, the city council's office and the correction commission do not think that civilian oversight is a good idea. They're actively resisting it. They are actively resisting it. They don't want to appear that way, but that's exactly what it is. Brahma said, this is why I left. In addition to that, later on in the article, and you can read it for yourself, which raised a really good question. it's not exactly clear that the ordinance is requiring these trainings for this board. In fact, the ordinance says COB. So although everybody has been on board with these training from the beginning, we have came up with rules and procedures, we have posted them. I want to make it super clear that this is still a made up requirement for us. And although we're trying to be in compliance with it, we can't forget that the rules are still changing as we try to get further along in this process. And so 2 main points on that is that, yes, he did not answer, Director Cole or the mayor's administration did not answer our concerns. It is still clear, and former Commissioner Brumman has said on record, and in front of the Public Safety Board as well, all of the challenges that he's raised in getting information. And third, this is still very clear in every sense of the word, and an opportunity to stop the board from functioning the way that it is. I have no doubt in my mind that once we get these 11 trainings done, which is, 4 months from now, that's going to be something new. And so this is, I want to make it clear for the public and everybody else that this is just to keep dragging us along. And the demand was, and we were very strong about the demand, which I really appreciate it, was to call for the resignation of the commissioner. And that's what we meant.
Thank you, Mike. I saw James' hand up. James, you got the floor.
Yeah, I agree entirely with Mike here. It felt like they've been moving the goalposts the whole time. As soon as we think we're doing everything we can to be in compliance, they find another reason why we're not in compliance. It's hard to conduct this business without a good faith partner, and I don't feel like the city has been a good faith partner with us.
Thank you, James.
That's basically all I had to say on the matter.
You're coming back with real fire today. I love it. I saw Tom's hand up.
Yeah, it is amazing how long we've been doing this, basically a year or plus. And I just can't get over the fact that the leadership of our city has no interest in bettering the people that are in our detention facility. They're totally just sidestepping the major. Why did these people die? Why are these people sick? Why are they not getting this? Why are they not getting that? And all they can say is, you need training. And let's throw, Mr. Drummond, I forgot his first name, but under the bus. What it looks like we're going to have to fight our battle. It's going to have to be in the media. And that's the only thing. It's going to have to be a public spectacle, because their bureaucracy is on their side. And she has 46 certificates of positive administration, whatever it is, and she knows better. I mean, that's the bottom line. And there was nothing that was addressed about you, Janice, and the way you were treated. That is just incomprehensible. I can't get over these people that are elected or appointed to do this have no interest in bettering the situation, because that's what we are. We can make things better. We can take, the problems and present them in a positive light for change. But all they think is this conspiracy theory, and they're paranoid. So I personally think that we just got to keep up the public pressure on this. We've got to go public. We got to make it public.
Be still my heart. Let's see. It looks like we're probably only going to have time for everyone to speak once. But again, I want to remind everyone that as we move forward with the agenda, it'd be great if for this specific item, we had some kind of motion or action item moving forward, maybe a task force, something like that. But I want to give the remaining board members a chance to speak. Ornitha, Hillary, Pam. I believe that's everyone. Pam, yep.
I did not expect the city to fire anybody based on her request that they do so. So that's sort of like a whatever to me, because I knew that was going to be the answer. What I'm disappointed in is that I went to this bill signing on this original ordinance. And I walked out of that room and I tweeted that I thought this was landmark legislation that would be an example nationally for how to handle this issue in a way that improved the city, the detainees, the corrections officers, and everybody involved. And I'm just extremely disappointed that the deeds have not matched the words. And I don't know what that is or why, but the letter outlined some obstacles. I think we can address those obstacles by going back to the Board of Aldermen and saying we need clarity in these areas for both the board and the city, so that we're on the same page, and that we should, try to focus our efforts on the fix and not on the back and forth, and just get the mandates clear and the expectations clear. And we can discuss what that looks like. Like you said, Janice, through a subcommittee or something like that.
Oops, I said thanks, Pam. Cornetha or Hillary, would either of you like the floor? Or if I forgot someone else?
I feel
I'll
like.
speak.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Hillary.
Hillary, please.
No, you can go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say everyone that has already spoken has pretty much covered all the bases. And I think that everybody has expressed thoroughly how we all feel. And I'm just ready to move forward. I am disappointed, and I'm hopeful that, moving forward, that we can start moving in a more positive way, even with trainings, but nothing, it was kind of pivoted and nothing was really addressed. And I'm sorry for that, for sure. So, I mean, you all have covered everything else right now.
Thank you, Hillary. And Arnitha, you've got the floor.
I'm confused as to why they keep harping on this training, because what's her lady's name, Nicole, asked when we were available. I mean, I could have taken everything and then some. I told her I'm available any day, anytime, and I haven't heard anything. It's like we're children in kindergarten again. We can't move until the teacher says move.
Thank you, Arnitha. I do want to keep us moving, but I would like to give another chance for a motion or an action item. Otherwise, we're going to move on.
Sure, I'm just reluctant to recommend, because I think that if I made a recommendation, it would be for a subcommittee of 3 to meet in person with the interim public safety director, and in requesting that meeting, ask him that the meeting is intended for him to respond specifically to the 8 points that we've raised in the letter, and that be done face to face. That would be my recommendation. With
the recording, you mean?
I don't know about the recording part.
Okay.
I would say that we would recommend that. I mean, if we've got 3 people, chair, from our board that would meet, and I'm sure that if Director Coyle agreed to meet to specifically discuss these 8 items, that we would have our 3 people, and I'm sure he would bring somebody in there too to respond. I think that might be the best that we could ask for at this point, rather than, not saying that recording is a bad idea, particularly because of the miscommunication
Sure.
But I'm not sure I'm willing to say a recorded conversation at this point, as long as we at least get a sit down
Okay.
only to talk about these 8 items. I don't want to talk about anything else, want to respond to these 8 items.
Okay.
That would be my recommendation.
If you could make a motion and make it, I don't know, like, I would suggest a tiny bit more vague and not specify it to 3 people, just so we can
Okay.
like, yeah.
I move that this board constitute a subcommittee, numbers to be decided upon, to request a meeting with the interim public safety director to speak specifically to the 8 issues that were articulated in our correspondence to him dated June 5th, 2023. And that meeting be held within the next 10 to 14 days.
Okay, do we have a second?
Is that specifically vague enough?
Yes, I like it. Do you have a
I
second?
second that motion.
Okay, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. Reverend Gray,
Yes.
Pam Walker,
Yes.
Barb Baker,
Yes.
James Dom,
Aye.
Tom Lawson,
Aye.
Renita Lewis Walls,
Yes.
Mike Milton. Mike Milton,
I'm sorry, yes.
Hillary Stuckey.
Yes.
Okay, for the sake of time, we will go with 3. Are there any volunteers? Otherwise, I will be picking. Volunteers.
Yeah, I will volunteer myself.
Great. Other volunteers?
I'll
I'll
volunteer.
go.
Who is that? Ornitha as well?
Yeah.
Okay, looks like Mike, Ornitha, and Reverend Gray. Perfect. Okay, we're a tiny bit behind, but we're gonna make it up. The next item on the agenda is jail conditions, jail visits, and DFOB testimony discussion, which I know is a lot. I thought we would have an update on, okay, so I guess one quick thing. So I suppose that the warden has been claiming, and Coyle's letter suggests that anyone who has gotten the 16-hour training can tour at any time. I know right now that is Hillary. I also know that that training has not been offered to us again. So one ask is Ruby, or let's see, is Nicole on here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Ruby, could you, or someone on staff, somehow get from the warden another training date for that 16 hours?
I will request it, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Good luck. Godspeed.
Thank you.
Yes, so yeah, at some point there was a discussion where I requested that Nicole Barton include me on meetings so that we could make that training realistic for people who have day jobs. But that never happened. So we'll see about getting another date for this 16 hours. I will try to go if I can. And then, yeah, I was actually going to pass it to you, Hillary.
My question is it might be Ruby, because I had the training, if the other board members were to go, is it the understanding that they can go with one of your staff members accompanied because they've been trained, and not me as the board member, but another staff member?
I do recall something to that effect. I believe
Yes,
that might have been suggested by Nicole. So I'll get with her prior to, making the request of Commissioner Clemens Abdullah, so that we can coordinate the effort and make sure we're all on the same page before I then disseminate that information to the board.
Okay, that was my question, just so we.
Yeah, I had heard that too, but there's been so much back and forth.
Ruby,
Okay.
I think I know what you're referring to, and it was the warden saying that her original proposal was that board members could not take the 16-hour training, but staff could. And if staff took the 16-hour training, then they could be like a chaperone to board members. And through being with the staff member, we could gain access to the jail. So essentially that anyone with that training could lead a tour of, any reasonable size. So if I got the training, for example, then I could take Mike and Hillary or whoever. Yeah, I think the other issue with that is
now,
that
I got a question on that. So now that, because Hillary and the investigators got the training, or staff has gotten the training, we're able to go into the jail now, as long as we're accompanied by them?
I don't think,
And if it was me being a board or the staff member, that was my question too, Mike. That was what I needed clarification.
so it's anyone who has had the 16-hour training. I know that Hillary and Matt have had the training. Are there other staff members that have had the 16-hour training?
The investigative staff got the training with Member Stuckey.
Okay, perfect. So it looks like all of them.
So if that's true, then we can go in now. We can go in now as long as we're accompanied by those folks.
I would ask for an opportunity to get clarification on that. At the time when we can get, training dates. I'll get that information back to the board just as soon as I receive clarification. I would hate for the board to expend time and energy, and I'm not clear on what that directive was.
Yeah, I remember that being said. I don't know if this is a question of Ruby or who, but if it was said in previous meetings, maybe we can find it in the minutes too, huh?
I'm
We can
pretty
do a search for there as well.
I'm pretty sure I have an email from the commissioner, obviously not to me, sorry, from the warden, obviously not to me, but forwarded to me, where she does say this. But the larger issue is that, one, she has made that, and we're not necessarily bound by the rules that she makes, except for when we are, because no one can say different. And two, that she could change that rule at any time. And three, that even if that rule was a thing, we could get to the door and she could say no.
Right. But if she said it previously, let's,
I'll find that email and I'll forward it. While I do that, Reverend Gray, did you? Yeah.
I was waiting. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, okay. Could you give us a recap of your testimony?
I'd be delighted. Can I ask a question first, Chair, to Ruby? Now, my understanding is that there is a process in place for staff to investigate. So staff right now, if it had a reason or an issue, staff could go in and investigate. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
That was my understanding as well, Reverend Gray. However, I can share that the division through me did initiate a complaint that we received that we felt was very urgent.
Okay.
And in our efforts to attempt to investigate that, we received an opinion from the city councilor that still needs some clarification. So suffice it to say that we are not investigating. We're getting complaints and we're making initial inquiries to the division. And we've gotten some email responses to those inquiries, but that is the extent to what has happened at this point.
Mhm.
Can I
And
make-
once, and once again, I plan to have some meetings, some upcoming meetings with stakeholders and Nicole Barton, so that we can get some clarifications on what it is staff can and cannot do at this point.
Okay, because my question is Chair, very specific, and regardless of it, when I ask the question, is there currently a process for staff investigation, be it verbal or in writing? Does
There is a
exist?
process, Reverend Gray.
Gotcha,
There,
okay,
there is a definite process.
okay,
And investigations to some extent were occurring
okay,
prior to changes in the ordinance.
there you go. All right.
So
That answers my question, Chair, to Ms. Brown. I want to say Sister Ruth, please excuse my
it's
language.
okay. I answered to
Because
that.
I think it is important for the board to know and for the public to know that that process does exist, so that while we are going through everything else that we're going through, and Mike brought it up, that at least, if not the board, at least we're beginning to see some light for the staff to be able to do what they've been hired to do, which is to conduct investigations. And so, even though it may be a little murky or unclear, it's still good to know that that process does exist. So I thank you, Chair, for allowing me that. Quickly, I'm going to be real quick because I know you want to stay on time so that we can do the training. I did have an opportunity to make testimony before the Public Safety Committee, thanks to Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard, who facilitated my request to meet with the committee, and for the chair of the Public Safety Committee at the last minute to allow me to make brief testimony. I indicated to the Public Safety Committee that my reason for making testimony, because I felt then, and I continue to feel, that the conditions within the correctional center are is at a critical point. And it is unfortunate that that statement is not being allowed to either be refuted or sustained by our lack of access to the correctional facility. I then reminded the board, the committee, that this board is made up of a city ordinance that came out of the Public Safety Committee, that went to the Board of Alderpeople and was approved. And so this board is a creation of the Public Safety Committee with the support of this administration. And so everybody agreed that this detention facility oversight board was necessary, and that it was critical to ensure the accountability and transparency as related to that facility. Everybody agreed. And so I suggested to the Public Safety Committee that if, in fact, the oversight board is not able and or allowed to have access to the facility, then the Public Safety Committee should construct a subcommittee that would investigate the concerns that have been lodged by the Detention Facility Oversight Board. Basically, what I did share is say, if we cannot have access, if we cannot get answers to the 8 points that we raised, with the interim public safety director, then maybe the public safety committee can do it. And several alder people expressed their concern and their support for that recommendation. I don't know where it is yet. I don't know the status of it. And then lastly, I recommended that the Public Safety Committee review the ordinance along with the members of the Oversight Board and members of the administration to review the ordinance to see if in fact there are elements of the ordinance that might be obstructive in nature, that may not allow the board to conduct its business the way the administration, the executive legislative branch of city government, as well as the public, thought that this board might operate. And so the members of the Public Safety Committee agreed that they would avail themselves to be part of a review of the ordinance. We did get a communication from President Megan Green and her staff that they would be prepared to sit with board members to review the ordinance, and Ms. Nicole Barton, representing the administration, has also indicated. So there is, Chair, some agreement on the part of all of the parties involved, stakeholders, that we would coordinate an opportunity to review the ordinance. And I'm waiting on some dates from Mayor Green's office that we can share with members of the board, the mayor's office, and all the parties involved. And those dates have not been forthcoming yet. I did say finally, Baptist preachers always get 3 finallys. This is my 3rd finally. I did indicate that I had reason to believe that conditions, particularly in holding cells, needed to be looked at immediately. And I'm hoping that because my concern is for the health, safety, and welfare of the detainees there, prior to them being processed. And I shared that with the Public Safety Committee. I'd like to say, Chair, that I do feel that based upon their questions and their response, that there is significant concern from members of the Public Safety Committee that our concerns are valid and that they need to be looked at. And I'm hoping that the chair of the Public Safety Committee will convene that subcommittee and they'll move on our concerns as quickly as possible. That is the summary of my testimony, and I thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to share.
Thank you. I'm excited to see where this goes. Let's move on to the next agenda item, which is independent counsel. Reverend Gray, this was something that you had suggested at our last meeting, I believe.
Yeah, and I'd like to move that we table it to the next meeting. And my rationale for moving it, Chair, is because I think that in one of our trainings tonight, we will be speaking with representatives from the city councilor's office. And I'd like us to pose the question to them, what happens in conflict of interest? And so I'd like an answer to that in order to be able to determine how to move forward with the possibility and or necessity for independent counsel. But I don't have enough information. And I have been talking to some outside counsel, but I'd like to pose that question to the city councilor and or her representative in order for us to be in a better position, Chair, to really deal with that issue
Mhm.
with enough information. I don't think we have enough information to honestly have an honest, fruitful, meaningful conversation. So I would move that we table that discussion for the next meeting.
Can I suggest that you formulate your questions in writing so that we could send them to the city councilor's office?
Okay.
I provided the city councilor's office with an alternative to what they suggested, which was a closed meeting for the confidentiality training, which I did not deem necessary. And the alternative I proposed was that we send our requests for any legal advice in writing, and that they could reply with their legal advice on the standard attorney-client privilege confidential letterhead.
I'll put those questions in writing.
Perfect, sounds good. And if anyone else has questions or requests for legal advice that they would like to attach to that letter and send to the city councilor, if they could get that to their future chair, that would be great, with Ruby CC'd, of course. Okay, next on the agenda is new business. Do we have any new business?
Just a question, Chair,
Sure.
and I might already know the answer. Somebody might be able to. The position for commissioner, for the commissioner's position.
Yeah.
Has that been posted? And if not, do we have any idea when it will be posted?
Ruby can speak to this one for sure.
At our last check, the position had not been posted.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other new business?
Only, I'm sorry, my last question.
Mhm.
Have we confirmed, Chair, that our next meeting will be for training only? How do we go about making sure that we get that done?
Sure, so luckily, well,
You're smiling.
that's up to you, Chair, because when this meeting closes, you will be able to interact with Nicole on that.
I have one ask, Chair Mensa and future Chair
yep.
Gray.
Sure.
There had been some discussion about the joint complaint form
Mhm.
being on this agenda, and I specifically asked that we be given time to review that. I wanted to acknowledge and recognize Ms. Barton's efforts. This represents at least one of the things that we needed consultation on. And so since she's indicated that consultation has occurred, I would not want to put it off much longer. I'm certain by the time of the next meeting, the staff will have done all of the reviews that need to take place, I believe, prior to distribution to the board. So if we could have whatever time Reverend Gray would like us to complete it in, I would ask that the complaint form be on the next agenda.
To that point, well, one, just that if there's anything, well, this is, yeah. Anyways, so to that point, I'd already planned to send Ruby some comments on the complaint form since I did already see it. I took a quick look at it and I do have some concerns about everything that's asked there. Regarding the incident that I had at the jail where I was pushed by Tammy Ross. I was gonna file a complaint for that, but I looked through the form and there was some information that I didn't really want to share with the warden who would be looking at the complaint. And I think it's a good perspective to have since we're gonna be asking members of the public to submit their information in this way. And there are just our general concerns about who will be seeing that information, especially if immediate action won't be taken which it wasn't taken in the last case scenario that Ruby brought up where we weren't allowed to investigate. So just to make that comment. And I think that's it.
Well,
Chair,
I
just to
would
Ruby's,
encourage all, since it was distributed prior to staff review, if any board member has any comments relative to that form, I would encourage you to get them to me. It might require then that, I'm not sure, because I don't know what the comments will be. However, we have to keep in mind that if there are significant changes to the form, Nicole may determine that it needs to go back to those stakeholders for consultation. But if in fact it's ready for consideration, final consideration by the board, I'm sure anxious to get that done.
right.
One
And
addition-
my commitment, Chair, my commitment, it's coming in is that the first thing I'm gonna do is debrief with our current chair to see where we are on anything that our current chair has been dealing with or has deemed a priority on behalf of the board. And so obviously this form is one of those things. So after I have an opportunity to debrief with the current chair, then I'll be in a better position to give any kind of information to the rest of the board members so that the board as a whole can determine the what's next. And so, Sister Ruby, after I have a chance to talk to our current chairperson, then my next debrief will be with you. And then the next debrief will be with Ms. Barton, more than likely in that order.
Okay.
I also want to comment that if board members are sending comments on this form, also keep in mind that this is one form for the DFOB and for the COB. So
Okay.
any changes that are going to be, just that these processes need to happen for both sides. So it's not like we can just put a jail specific question on there or something without considering that this is the form for submitting police complaints as well.
Okay.
Mike?
Yeah, I just had a quick question about the process of the form, which is also unclear in the review complaint. So I'm
After
hoping,
submitting it,
after submitting it, yes.
I think we should probably, I think we might want to table that.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think we'll want to table that one, especially if we're going to be able to get a meeting with Coyle, because it's that seems to be up to him on that one. Okay, if we could move on to public comment. Do any members of the public want to comment? We can probably take one or two people, 3 minutes each. If there's no hands, we are going to go straight into training, which will be 1 hour long. It'll be on confidentiality, and it may not be all too interesting to the public. So now is your time. Going once. You can raise your hand or come off mute. I did see one person connecting to audio. Oh, that might have been Dana. Okay, so it looks like there's no public comment. Members of the public, I welcome you to come back and provide your comment. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, so moving on to confidentiality training. So I believe there are 3 sections. It was presented to me that there'd be 3 sections to this. Originally, it was requested that the entire hour be closed. And then it was said that only 15 minutes needed to be closed and the other 45 could be open. The 15 minutes that would be closed was said to be the part by the city councilor's office. And I had clarified with both Barb Burkett and Nicole Barton that I wanted to err on the side of public transparency, especially considering that the last closed training did not appear to me to need to be closed after we took it. And again, I suggested the alternative that we provide any requests for legal advice in writing, and we could receive those answers in writing. That way we would have a record of it for reference. And so, but it does, I never received a response back from Nicole on that. So is anyone here that knows whether or not we're getting the city councilors portion?
Is Nicole present
Oh,
at this
back
point?
on. She's back on here.
Oh, she is?
I'm back.
Hi, did you hear what I said before?
I just kind of logged in, so I think I might have missed something. Would it be okay if you state it again?
Yes, I'll restate. I also want to let you know that you're cutting in and out a bit. Okay, so I was just saying, I was just tracking how organizing confidentiality training went. That originally it was 1 hour that was requested to be all closed. And after I said that I would like to err on the side of public transparency so that we only closed what was absolutely necessary, it was said that 45 minutes of it could be open, but 15 minutes where the city council's office would be presenting on confidentiality would be closed. And I responded to that with an alternative where the city councilor's office, city councilor's office could present on state and local statutes, publicly available information on the premise of confidentiality. And if we had any requests for specific legal advice, that legal advice, which would be a reason to close a meeting, we would submit that in writing and wait for a response from the city councilor's office in writing. And I didn't receive a response on whether or not the city councilor's office accepted that offer, if they were presenting today. So if you could speak to that. Do we still have Nicole? It's hard to keep track of some of the people in here. I think we lost her. Okay, well.
Chair, would it be only because we're at 6:28?
Yeah.
Would it be in order for me to make a motion that the first 45 minutes be open and the final 15 minutes with the city attorney be a closed meeting, only because we don't know because we don't know what the training is. It's hard to know if we're going to ask any questions or not, even if it's questions of clarification. And I'm like you, we all want to get this training over. And I do agree that transparency has always been an issue, but I think for the sake of moving forward expeditiously, I'd like to make a motion that the first 45 minutes be open and the final 15 minutes with the training with the city attorney be a closed meeting. That's my motion.
So I can clarify that we can't just make a motion to close a meeting since we did not put it on the agenda with the subsection of why it would be closed. And that was because, I think it can be closed for legal advice specifically. And I honestly, to speak plainly, I think the fixation on closing the meeting and on insisting on providing legal advice to therefore close the meeting is just an example of obstruction and of how this training and this notion of training will just keep getting elongated. There's nothing in the ordinance that says that the city councilor's office has to present something closed legal advice about confidentiality, or that without that portion, the 45 minutes we take today doesn't mean that we can check off the confidentiality part of the training. I see
that's a good, that's a good point you just made, Chair. If I can't make the motion anyway, then the conversation is mute. So to our council on the, as a point of clarity, can I make the motion, yes or no?
To close the meeting? No.
No, you cannot.
Okay, so then.
It's
the
6:31.
Yeah, so it's a mute conversation. There you go.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, can
so
we
then We'll just have.
do
to
the
get to
training that's
6:45.
people,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's 6:31.
yeah, can we just do the training that people are here to give us? And when we get done with all this training, if the city councilor or somebody else says we missed something, we'll go back to that, but this is circular. And I
Okay.
just want to get some training under my belt. Can we just go?
Okay,
Right.
sounds good. Let's go ahead and start the training. Nicole, do you mind introducing our presenters? And then we'll go ahead and get started. And I guess we'll just have a little bit of extra time to ask questions.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the DFOB. So we've worked together for the past couple of weeks with the 3 departments. So the Department of Personnel, the Police Department, and the City Councilor's Office to deliver the training for you all tonight. So just for context, I think I missed a little portion. That last 15 minutes was just to discuss confidentiality as it relates to employment records. So like the confidentiality for city appointed officials and employees under Missouri Revised Statute 105.452 and potential consequences for violating provisions, and case law involving persons held liable for violations of sunshine law and potential penalties under sunshine law, and confidentiality rules and ordinance numbers 71430 and 71647. So that's what that portion was for, just so you know. But tonight we are ready to deliver the training that we have thus far that is in open meeting. And I have Brian Beckelman from the Department of Personnel, and I have Erica Saza from the Police Department for them to do their presentation. So if it's okay to do a screen share, I think they both have PowerPoints they wanted to share with you all. And we would like to start with Brian Beckelman. Are you here, Brian?
Yes, I am. We're both here, Nicole. This is Director Gray.
Hi, Director Gray. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, everyone. So I just kind of thought I would kick us off with the training just to kind of give you an idea of what we're going to present to you tonight from the Department of Personnel.
Sorry, Director Gray.
Yeah.
Your sound is coming in a bit muffled. I can hear you, but I'm concerned that if anyone has hearing issues, they might have trouble.
Can you hear me now? Is it better?
It might be a bit worse, actually.
What about now?
No.
Not better. I'm not exactly sure what's going on. But I only was just going to do an introduction really quickly of myself and Brian.
Okay.
And the intent of our presentation tonight. It is primarily going to be around the civil service rules, as well as the charter and some of our administrative regulations that will be pertinent to you in carrying out your responsibilities per the ordinance. So with that being said, I'm just going to turn it over to Brian. He's one of the deputy directors in the Department of Personnel, and he is our senior policy advisor, the person that is most experienced in all of our rules and the charter within the Department of Personnel. So Brian.
Director, thank you very much. You truly flatter me and I'm touched. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for letting me be a part of your meeting this evening. I'd like to start off by thanking you for your time. I know none of us have time to waste. We're all very busy, and I appreciate each and every one of you and the important jobs you're doing on this board for our city to make it a better place to live and work. So having that said, I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Well, that's embarrassing.
Yeah, so we just need to make the Department of Personnel user and I believe Erica Zaza hosts, which Answar should be able to do.
Awesome. I'm glad someone does because I'm completely inept at that kind of thing. I can try and stand here and talk to you about the charter, the rules, Department of Personnel policy, but I need help with a laptop.
Looks like Erica is host now. And thank you both for coming.
It's truly a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try to figure it out when it's my turn.
Okay.
Sorry, if you're looking for if you're looking for Brian, the participant name is Department of Personnel.
You had to transfer the host back to me in order for me to change it.
Erica, are you familiar with how to transfer the host to either, I guess you could transfer it straight to Department of Personnel.
What do I need to do? I'm sorry.
Transfer host to Department of Personnel.
How would I do that?
If you hover your mouse over Brian's image, right? Is this how you did it, Answar? Hovered over, click the three dots, and
Okay.
then click
Make host.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. You
Gotcha.
should be ready to share.
Okay, let's give it a try. It worked. Awesome. Okay, let me find my PowerPoint. Let's see. Please bear with me. Okay. Open with Google Slides. No pressure here. Please open. Wonderful. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to attempt to do is give you a brief overview of the City of St. Louis Charter's Article 18. And the reason I start with Article 18 is that is our Bible when it comes to civil service at the City of St. Louis. The civil service rules, the Department of Personnel regulations, they're all promulgated from this one article in the city charter. So what is the charter? The charter is the city's organic law. It's the city's constitution, our governing structure. And as far as our civil service goes, it was amended in the early 1940s to replace its politically controlled efficiency board with Article 18 civil service. Civil service is a fancy sounding word. I describe it to anyone that's wanting my take on it this way. The whole point of our civil service system is to create a professional and attractive career government service free from political influences. It's the exact opposite of what is commonly referred to as a patronage or spoils system. And the merit system principles and policies established in this article are the basic requirements for our civil service. So the article establishes several things pertinent to our discussion. It establishes the city's Department of Personnel, our Civil Service Commission and the Commissioner's powers and duties, the Director of Personnel and the qualifications, powers, duties, and authority of the Director. It mandates civil service merit-based testing for fitness for duty. And it also makes clear who makes all the employment transactions in each city department. We're talking about certified appointments, promotions, demotions, transfers, disciplines, and dismissals. And the charter makes it clear that's under the authority of every individual appointing authority. So I think that's important to point out, just to clarify. All human resources or personnel transactions in the city of St. Louis are approved by the Director of Personnel or her designees working for her. The actual actions taken in each city department regarding disciplining and firing city employees, that's under the sole discretion and authority of each individual civil service department operating appointing authority. So some of the main things, just to give you a brief idea of what the Director of Personnel's and her department's powers and duties are. This article establishes our classification plan. That's our system for paying city employees. I'm sorry, I got it backwards. The classification plan is actually responsible for how we create city jobs in the civil service. It's how we determine, no, this is really a police officer. This is a police sergeant. This is a corrections officer. This is a corrections shift superintendent. The compensation plan is our formula for paying them. It establishes a service rating system, which is how we go about reviewing and documenting an employee's performance. It requires competitive examinations, practical in character, designed to fairly measure relative qualifications of candidates for all civil service jobs. It requires eligible list. Eligibility lists are the outcome of civil service testing. Everyone that passes a civil service test goes on an eligible for employment list in final overall score order. Certifications and appointments. That's just a fancy way of saying anytime there's one vacancy in the city service, police, corrections, personnel, anywhere, the 6 highest ranked candidates on an eligible list are referred off the list to the appointing authority for appointment. Employee transactions. The director, again, per this article, must approve or disapprove all appointments, demotions, transfers, promotions, service ratings, leaves of absence, dismissals, basically every employment transaction in the full life cycle of city civil service employment. The article also gives the director of personnel authority to administer oaths and subpoenas and require witnesses whenever investigations are warranted in her discretion. Political activity. This is a big one because part of being good civil servants is we not only keep the politics out of employment, but we don't participate in it. We have an obligation to serve the elected officials, regardless of who is mayor, comptroller, president of the board, or a member of the board of aldermen or alderwomen. However, the most we can do is hang a sign in our yard or make a donation to a political campaign. We cannot assist anyone seeking office or re-election with assistance in their campaign, nor can we take a leave of absence and come back to the job later after engaging in those activities. The civil service rules are promulgated from the charter. The charter is very dense and full of legalese, but that's just the bare bones directives we have to follow. The civil service rules flesh those out. And the director of personnel is the one responsible here at the city with suggesting, writing with her staff, proposed changes to those rules. And the Civil Service Commission actually votes on whether or not to adopt those amendments to the rules. The Board of Aldermen can also legislate city ordinances that affect civil service employment and how we promote in the city service. For example, we give promotional city employees a 5-point preference when they get a passing score on a civil service test. That's the result of a charter amendment in 2008. However, we also give preference points to veterans and disabled veterans and for city residency. But that's nothing that's derived from the charter. That's actually the result of ordinances legislated by the Board of Aldermen and signed by the mayor. So what happens if proposed changes to the rules and proposed ordinances conflict with the charter? It's a simple answer. The charter trumps them. Per the charter, the director of personnel has authority to make such administrative regulations as he may deem necessary. And I emphasize here, not inconsistent with the charter, ordinances applicable, and these rules. Changes to the charter. Yes, they're not impossible to make, but you have to go to a citywide vote. It takes 2/3 of the registered voters to enact a change to the charter. That's a little over 60% of the voters to pass amendments to the city's charter. It's not impossible, but it is difficult to do because, in all honesty, most voters usually don't understand the proposed changes to the charter. There are currently 20 civil service rules. I'll list them briefly for you. Definitions, general provisions, commission organization and procedures. That's the rule specific to our Civil Service Commission. We'll discuss that further in my presentation. Some of this is probably looking familiar by now. The classification plan, compensation plan, test, certifications and appointments, working test periods. That's our fancy way of saying probations. 9, separations and disciplinary actions. Service ratings, that's the annual rating you get yearly once you pass your probation. Hours of work, leave, and working conditions, employee welfare, appeals, hearings, investigations, and reviews. That's all under the authority of our commission. Records and reports, political activity, equal employment opportunity, audit of payrolls, labor relations, confidentiality of police officer records, exceptions, and validity of the rules. Now, for brevity and to really cut it down to what the director and I think are most important to share with you tonight for the purposes of training, I'm going to be focusing on 3 particular rules, 8, 9, and 13, because they're the most relevant to an appointing authority's ability to discipline and dismiss permanent city civil service employees. Please note that 19, confidentiality of police records, exceptions, that's going to be discussed further after my presentation by Ms. Erica Zaza, Sunshine Law Administrator for the Police Division. She's truly our subject matter expert here at the city. I'm going to start off with the 3 I'm focusing on in numerical order. Rule 8 is working test, and I emphasize it because newly hired and promoted city employees work in a mandatory probationary period. There's no getting around that per the charter. And employees only receive permanent status and civil service protections as a result of passing this probationary period. Whether or not an employee passes their probation, it's solely at the discretion of their individual appointing authority. Failure to successfully complete a working test period results in dismissal for a probationary employee. Employees without status have no appeal rights to the Civil Service Commission in accordance with Rule 13, which I'm going to discuss a little later. I also want to point out that civil service employees who fail working test periods resulting from promotions return to their previously occupied positions if they had status in them. Here's, I think, a prime example with that ties to investigations you'll be conducting. Let's say a correction officer 2 is promoted by the Commissioner of Corrections to correctional unit manager. Let's say there's complaints of inappropriate behavior. Let's say the FSOB investigates it and recommends discipline. If it's while that employee is on their working test period for correctional unit manager, that discipline could be have a result in failing that employee on their working test period as correctional unit manager. However, if they promoted from a correction officer 2 and had status in that job, they will return to that correction officer 2 position. So in my long-winded way, that's why I included that in this presentation. Rule 9, separation and disciplinary actions. Section 110 reads, every employee who is legally appointed as a result of certification from an appropriate eligible list and who successfully completes his or her working test period shall have indefinite tenure of employment in the classified service during meritorious service. And I quote that language from the rule because it's not just germane to the rule. That's pretty much copied and pasted verbatim from Article 18. What does all that mean? Ladies and gentlemen, it means permanent civil service employees may only be disciplined and dismissed for cause. Section 3, disciplinary action. Employees in the competitive service may be dismissed, demoted, reduced in pay, suspended without pay, or reprimanded for just cause. And appointing authorities may take one of the following disciplinary actions for just cause with the Director of Personnel's approval. You can give the employee a written reprimand. You can suspend the employee without pay. However, you cannot have a suspension in our civil service exceed 28 calendar days in any 12 successive months. You can temporarily reduce the employee's pay. However, reductions in pay cannot be greater than 15%, and they cannot exceed 13 pay periods. I point that out because there are 26 pay periods every year at the city. So basically that means that if you reduce an employee's pay, it cannot exceed 6 months out of the 12-month calendar year. An appointing authority may also give the employee a disciplinary demotion to a vacant position in a lower pay grade in their department for which the employee is qualified. Or the appointing authority can fire the employee. Now, the city civil service has a progressive discipline policy. And before I move on to Rule 13, I'd like to take a moment to talk to you about Department of Personnel Administrative Regulation number 117, discipline policy. This regulation is the document of record, legally speaking, for the process of disciplining civil service employees. And appeals of discipline and dismissals are granted by our Civil Service Commission if said actions do not follow this regulation. So, ladies and gentlemen, I really want to emphasize, if you take away nothing else from this presentation tonight, remember, any recommendations for discipline as a result of an investigation the FSOB conducts, that discipline, if it's going to be enacted by the appointing authority, it has to conform to this regulation. Now, what's the whole point of our progressive discipline policy, ladies and gentlemen? It places an employee on notice that his or her actions will not be tolerated, and if they continue, it will result in more serious discipline up to and including dismissal. Each offense must be judged on a case-by-case basis, and consideration must be given to the employee's entire work history when determining the appropriate action to take. In other words, the simplest way I know how to put it, to use the legal, if not biblical phrase, the punishment should fit the crime. The Department of Personnel reviews all proposed discipline to ensure that it is appropriate, progressive in nature, and excluding those instances that warrant an exception to progressive discipline. As you can imagine, circumstances may necessitate relieving an employee from duty and placing the employee immediately on forced leave pending an investigation and or a pre-termination review. Generally, forced leave is appropriate when an employee poses a threat to himself, herself, other employees on the work site, or the citizens, our customers that we work in contact with every day. Now, whenever an appointing authority disciplines an employee, the following must occur before the disciplinary action is approved by the Director of Personnel, and that discipline is documented on paper and placed in the employee's personnel file. A pre-disciplinary notice and review is required prior to the imposition of any disciplinary action of a permanent employee. And the review is an informal procedure in which the appointing authority or their designee advises the employee of the charges against them, gives an explanation of the charges and the evidence, and allows the employee an opportunity to present facts to any disciplinary prior to any disciplinary action being imposed. Now, this disciplinary review hearing that's required, it's not a formal hearing. We're not going to court here, nor is it an extended procedure at which the employee presents witnesses, cross-examines the appointing authority, witnesses, etc. Now, before this hearing takes place, the written notice must be either hand-delivered to the employee or sent by certified mail to their address of record. And according to our Regulation 117, there's a whole checklist which has to be met. The letter notifying the employee has to tell them disciplinary action is being considered. It has to cite the specific charges, including pertinent dates, the rules or regulations that the employee violated, the place, date, and time of the review. The letter must inform the employee that they have a right to a representative and that the employee's prior and work record is being considered. And it must also tell the employee that if they fail to show up for this hearing, they waive their right to the review. Now, during the pre-disciplinary review, the following must occur. The appointing authority or their designee states the purpose of the review. They advise the employee of the charges. They give the employee or his or her representative an opportunity to respond to the evidence and the charges. It also gives the employee or the representative the opportunity to explain any mitigating circumstances they believe should be taken under consideration. And upon completion of the hearing, the appointing authority shall make a determination regarding the employee's discipline and notify the employee of their decision in writing within 14 calendar days after the date of the review. The rule and regulation permits exceptions to progressive discipline. In such cases, the appointing authority of the employee must notify the director of personnel or the director's designee in writing of their desire to place the employee on forced leave, the reason for the request, and they must obtain approval within 3 calendar days or 72 hours. When an employee is approved for forced leave by the director of personnel or her designee, the employee must be notified in writing by their appointing authority that they are being placed on forced leave. Now, if the employee has any vacation leave or compensatory time leave that they can use, they can be paid with that time while they are on forced leave. However, if they don't have any leave balances to use, they'll be docked. What are some exceptions of progressive discipline? Believe it or not, according to our regulation, there's quite a few. The commission of any act while on duty or off duty, which would be a violation of federal, state, or city law. So keep that in mind, whether it's a correction officer or a police officer or higher up in the chain of command. The offense doesn't have to happen on paid city time. It can occur off duty as well. Even myself, even a clerk, typist, or secretary that works for me or the director of personnel. As city civil service employees, we are held to a higher standard. Other exceptions: physical abuse of citizens, patients, clients, visitors, supervisors, co-workers, anything that would violate the city's policy on workplace violence. And as you can imagine, there's a regulation for that too. Unauthorized possession of a firearm or other dangerous weapons. Violation of the policy against harassment or the equal opportunity policy and complaint procedure. Possession of alcoholic beverages while on duty. Likewise, any illegal controlled substance or inability to perform duties in a safe and normal manner due to being under the influence or appearing to be under the influence of intoxicants. Refusal to submit to scientific tests to determine the presence or amount of alcohol and drugs in an employee's system. Unauthorized removal of city property. That's a fancy way of saying stealing. Participation in prohibited political activity. Failure to successfully complete the mandatory improvement plan, which is developed as a result of an overall unsuccessful employee service rating. Violating any provisions of the city's code of conduct. Falsification of time records or other official city records. Abandonment of job, which here is failing to show up for 3 days and failing to call in. Any other violation which is so serious that continued employment in the department would pose a threat to patients, clients, employees, visitors, and just erode the public confidence. So if the offense is so bad that the appointing authority wants to skip progressive discipline and do a pre-termination review, or if there have been a number of well-documented offenses and prior discipline, and the appointing authority is done with disciplining the employee and wants to proceed with termination, a pre-termination review must occur. And it's really the same process, ladies and gentlemen, as a pre-disciplinary review hearing. You still send the notice advising the employee of their rights. And it states the purpose of the review, advises the employee of the charges, tells them they have a right to a representative. And if they fail to appear, that they waive their right to the disciplinary review. And the appointing authority makes a determination regarding the status of the employee's tenure with the city within 14 calendar days of the pre-termination review, and they notify the employee in writing. That written notice must either be hand-delivered to the employee or sent by certified mail to the employee's address of record. And there are basically 3 outcomes. There can be a decision that no disciplinary action is required. There really were genuine mitigating circumstances, and the threat of dismissal is being set aside. The second outcome is that dismissal is too severe, but discipline is definitely warranted, and a lesser form of disciplinary action is required. such as a reduction in pay or a suspension. Or 3, dismissal is warranted and the employee is being terminated. So the city of St. Louis has the right to take any and all appropriate disciplinary actions, up to including dismissals, based on the circumstances of improper employee conduct while on or off duty. But keep in mind, a permanent city of St. Louis employee has the right to appeal their dismissal to our Civil Service Commission within 10 calendar days of the effective date of the letter sent to them by the Director of Personnel approving their dismissal. So first, they get the written notice from their appointing authority advising them that the outcome of their pre-termination or pre-dismissal hearing is they are being fired. The second letter comes from the Director of Personnel, and it certifies that the director has reviewed the circumstances and they are copacetic with Rule 9, Section 4 of the Civil Service Rules, and that the director is going on record and saying your dismissal was solely based on the grounds of merit and fitness. Now, the Director of Personnel's letter also advises the employee of their right to appeal their dismissal to our Civil Service Commission within 10 calendar days on the date of her letter. So now I'm moving on to Civil Service Rule 13. As I mentioned earlier, the Civil Service Commission is the policy-making body for our merit system. Article 18 vests the commission with responsibility for making rules and adjudicating appeals consistent with the article. And, you know, they're a big deal, folks. Their duties are quasi-judicial as well as quasi-legislative in nature. The commission has the authority to adjudicate appeals from our permanent employees who believe they have been unfairly disciplined and dismissed. And hearing officers assist our commission by conducting the appeals scheduled for formal evidentiary hearings. And the commission reviews the proceedings of these hearings and renders a decision. And one thing that's really great about our current group of hearing officers is they're all retired judges. So they're not just attorneys with an employment background that are, or an arbitration background. These are retired judges that have basically done what you're doing in a commission appeal in a courtroom, in a court of law. Now, all forced leaves, dismissals, suspensions, reductions in pays, demotions, and written reprimands can be appealed by employees with permanent status to the commission. And the hearings are conducted in accordance with applicable provisions set out in Missouri state statute. The appellant may retain an attorney for representation, or they can appear pro se and represent themselves. Most of our employees that get in trouble, especially if they're repeat offenders, they're no dummies. They'll have a lawyer represent them. Employee representatives or union representatives may not act as an appellant's legal representative in these hearings. However, they can attend and they can provide advice and counsel during breaks in the procedures. All civil service hearings and motions are on record and submitted with the record. They are closed records as well. And they're basically like a courtroom hearing. The examination witnesses consist of 1, direct examination, cross-examination, and redirect. All parties are entitled to subpoena witnesses to testify at the hearings. And this is very important. The decisions of the commission in all such matters is final, subject, however, to any right of action under state or federal law. And I point this out not only because it's a critical fact, but legally it's the concept of exhausting internal remedies. If an employee feels they've been unfairly disciplined or dismissed, and they want to sue in either circuit or federal court with their legal representative, they have to exhaust their internal remedies and appeal to the Civil Service Commission first before they move on to court. And per the rule, no hearing shall be granted, rehearing shall be granted from a final decision by the commission. There are no rewinds, there are no retakes. The commission's decision is final. Per Rule 13, after hearing and or reviewing and considering the evidence, the commission shall prepare a report of its finding and conclusions of law approving or disapproving the disciplinary action. So what happens if they approve the disciplinary action? It's deemed final. It's a done deal, ladies and gentlemen. In case of disapproval, the commission shall order the reinstatement, demotion, suspension, or reduction in pay of the employee or such other action as it deems suitable and order full pay for time lost as the result of the disciplinary action. It's the concept of making the employee whole. And in the case of a dismissal, the commission will reinstate the dismissed employee with back pay, their lost wages, other damages, and frequently these decisions require that the employee's attorney's fees are paid as well. So in summary and conclusion, if you're not sick of me talking yet, if you want to wake up, if I'm putting you to sleep, there is a formal and well-documented process for disciplining and dismissing permanent civil service city employees. And any recommendations from the FSOB to appointing authorities for disciplining and dismissing permanent employees resulting from investigations must comport with pertinent civil service rules and Department of Personnel administrative regulations. A failure to comply with the above can and it will result in disciplinary actions being overturned by the Civil Service Commission. And dismissals overturned on appeal will result in employees being fully reinstated. And I'd like to close on a final remark about confidentiality of employee personnel files and records of discipline. It's extremely confidential, ladies and gentlemen. I know you all know this, but records pertaining to the hiring, firing, disciplining, and promoting of employees by any government agency are considered closed records under Missouri's Sunshine Law. Further, the city in 1990 enacted a privacy ordinance through the Board of Aldermen. It's what I refer to as the name, rank, and serial number ordinance. Under this ordinance, the only identifiable personnel records open to the public are records pertaining to the names of city civil service employees, the position they hold, their salary, and their length of service. So, if you have any questions, please don't be shy. The city's charter, civil service rules, and Department of Personnel administrative regulations are available online. They're very easy to find through a simple Google search. All you need to do is enter City of St. Louis Civil Service Rules, Department of Personnel administrative regulations, city charter. It's all online. But as I like to tell people, they are not light reading and they can be difficult to understand. And I'm going on my 18th year here, ladies and gentlemen. And, you know, there are times me and the management team, we all sit here and ask each other's opinions because you think you know them, and then a situation comes up, and lo and behold, there's more than one interpretation. And often what we're doing is calling the law department if we don't have a record of past case law here that one of us already knows about. So please don't go it alone. I'm here to serve and help. As the director mentioned earlier, one of the hats I wear for her is senior policy advisor. So if you ever have any questions and you think I can be of assistance, please reach out to me anytime. I have a work number, I have a work cell number, and my email address here is right here. You don't need those. You can just call the main number for the Department of Personnel and ask to be transferred to Brian Beckelman. Anything I can do, I'm happy to help. And if I don't know the answer, I'll be more than happy to get you to someone who I think does.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you. And if you're not sick of me, if I can answer any questions briefly before Erica takes over, I'd be more than happy to.
I see Reverend Gray has a question.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much, Brian. As usual, great job. And that the person, your director, that came on to introduce y'all, I don't know what else to say, so I won't say anything at all, Chair. My question, I'm hoping, is a simple one. Is based upon what you told us.
Yes, sir.
Is there a or could there be put together a checklist? For example, if as a board, we came to a place following an investigation by the investigators. They brought us a case. We find that someone was inappropriate, violated something, for lack of a better term. And as a board, we wanted to recommend, make a recommendation as it relates to discipline. Could your office put together a checklist? This is the process. From the time you decide that you want to make a recommendation, a disciplinary recommendation, these are the steps that you have to take so that we can follow a checklist versus having to go back and forth to determine whether or not we're doing something right or wrong. Is that something that is doable? Simple question. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I'm gonna try and keep myself out of trouble by staying in my lane and defer. Director, would you like to take a stab at that, or do you want me to share my opinion? You might have some thoughts you want to share before I talk.
And I concur with you, Brian. And Reverend Gray, a checklist, I think, would be appropriate in this case, so that one, the process is understood, and everyone understands and knows what is needed and what is required. So we don't find ourselves potentially at an impasse with being able to provide information or not provide information. So we can work on that in collaboration with the City Council's office.
Thank you, Director. Anything I could do to help, I'd be more than happy to. And the great thing about collaborating together on this is we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
No.
Administrative Regulation 117, it's a fairly thick document, and it outlines in detail, step by step, this is our discipline process. So, you know, as you get more familiar with the regulation, you can kind of look at the findings of fact from your investigation and say, yeah, that was pretty bad, but how bad was it? What do we think is appropriate to recommend? If you were to subpoena a personnel file and look at an employee's file and go, well, this is the first time there's been an incident like this. Maybe we should only recommend a written reprimand to formally document. Yeah, it wasn't that bad, but it's still a legitimate complaint. We need to put this in, we need to tell the employee's appointing authority, we need to recommend that. I really think it's appropriate to formally document that the behavior was inappropriate, and further instances will result in worse disciplinary outcomes. Similarly, you subpoena the file, you start looking through it, or an investigator does, and wow, this is the third or fourth complaint of excessive force, and there's been a written reprimand and a couple of suspensions. This is getting pretty bad. Is there a pattern here? Do we need to recommend, you know, more than another discipline? Do we want a reduction of pay for how many months? Or no, this is really bad. This arrestee or this resident of or guest of the corrections division had to be taken to the hospital because their injuries are pretty severe. Does that warrant an exception to progressive discipline? And do we want to recommend putting the employee on forced leave while you conduct your investigation? And as a result of the findings of fact, recommend scheduling the employee for a termination review. So yeah, a checklist like that, I think that's an excellent idea. And I'll shut up now. I'm talking way too much.
No, it was excellent. Good. It's great information. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I would also, although we may have this checklist, I would encourage the board to come up with your own internal documentation procedures on how you will handle your recommendations for discipline, so that you are clear on what it is that, on how you will operate.
All right. Thank you, Director Gray.
Yes, sir. Yes, Reverend.
Thank you, Director.
Brian, I have a question.
Yes.
When
How can I
we're
help?
when we're not thinking about dismissal as a result of discipline, instead, if we're thinking about, I guess the part one is that city employees have the right to resign without cause, right?
They can, yes, they can resign.
Okay, and if whatever their hiring authority is, do they have the power to request their subordinates' resignation, unrelated to the formal process of employee discipline and hearings?
I think that's a yes and no answer. And here's what I mean by that. If I misbehave and I'm really naughty, and Director Gray says, you know, Brian, I'm going to schedule you for a pre-disciplinary review hearing or a pre-termination review hearing. And I believe I have just cause to fire you. But if you want to hand me your resignation, I'll let you resign. And on your permanent record as a civil service employee, you resigned in good standing. And I won't take this documentation and put it in your personnel file. Then, yeah, that's possible.
And that's just a conversation.
Right, but here's the pitfall to that, in my humble opinion. If you are a permanent civil service employee and you resign in good standing, you're eligible for reemployment. And basically what happens is, if you're eligible for reemployment rights, you could file for those rights, be eligible for rehire, be rehired at the hourly rate of pay you left at, and get the same vacation accrual balance you left with. Right now, I'm up to 7 hours bi-weekly, but I've been here almost 18 years. A new hire off the street only gets 3 hours per paycheck. It's a big perk. So I say it's a pitfall because if you really believe you have just cause to discipline a bad actor in our civil service, if the appointing authority lets them off the hook by accepting their resignation, they can come back. And even if they don't come back at their old job in that department later on down the line, they could, their reemployment list could theoretically be used for the same job in another city department. Or if the list they're on is deemed appropriate for another civil service job, I really think when somebody, and this is just me, when you believe really bad behavior has occurred, don't reward it by letting the employee off the hook with a resignation. You hold them accountable, you go through the termination process, and they permanently go on record as being dismissed. And if you do it by the book, the commission should uphold it.
Is there, I'm not sure how we would find this, can we look at records of when this process has ever successfully is it public? I guess I'm trying to see how we could evaluate how this process has worked in the past from the point of just cause to discipline or to termination.
There's really, Chair, there's really not a process or a way that the board would be able to do that. Because in order to do that, that means that you would have to have access to records that you probably would not need access to. And so it would be very, very difficult to provide data or any type of support to the board with doing that type of, or that level of analysis.
Okay.
Right now.
So I will pass it to Pam in a moment, but I just raised that as a question because I'm thinking as a civilian oversight board that was made to kind of repair our relationship between the public and the city, and that is tasked with advocating for public interests. It seems like this process is pretty far removed from public input. Is that, so I was just thinking when Brian responded about resignation as a form of letting someone off the hook versus the disciplinary process. It sounds like requesting a resignation or whatever is the only method that's accessible to the public.
Accessible to the public? Well, all of our Civil Service Commission hearings are public. Except for if we go into closed session, there's some things when we're discussing the details, but they are public hearings. And in that process, I think in the process is fair from a standpoint of the employee can include an advocate on their behalf when they are going through the hearing process. As Brian mentioned, a lot of them do have representation when they do, or when they do go before the commission, or they are appealing to me. So that is a part of the process. But a lot of things, it gets into a lot of confidentiality for the city with regards to actions and things that are taking place. But there are processes in place that allows fairness for the employee, especially there are multiple layers of appeals, of appeal processes built into the regulation.
Director, may I
Okay.
add something, please, if it's okay with the chair?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both. I appreciate it. I know you have no reason to trust me. This is our first opportunity to speak together. But I pride myself on my honesty and integrity. And I want you to know that one of the things I think is really great about the civil service at the city, despite its flaws and imperfections and warts, is that there are so many internal layers of checks and balances. Because just because an appointing authority or their designee sends over discipline on paper to Madam Director of Personnel here, it doesn't mean she's just gonna rubber stamp it. There is a whole section of the department and one member of our staff whose entire job is to review all disciplinary actions and make sure they conform with Regulation 117. And if that employee sees problems with it, and they're looking for problems which would easily allow the commission to overturn the discipline because it didn't follow the reg. And why does this happen? Because the director and I and her staff, we're the HR nerds. We're the people that know HR, the appointing authorities running the departments, a police commissioner or corrections commissioner, or a parks or streets commissioner. They don't know HR like we do. Okay, so they don't always get it right. So this member of our staff, their whole job is to review the discipline on paper. And if there are problems, kick it back to the appointing authority and say, this is wrong, fix it. You didn't do that. You didn't send your letter certified mail. Though the employee will win their appeal if they appeal. Redo it, even if it means redoing the hearing. And then we're only human. After that employee gets everything back and thinks, okay, this looks okay, they give it to their HR manager to review. And only if the manager agrees that this is correct. And I used to be a manager at one time reviewing that discipline, and I'd catch things my employees would overlook. I'd give it back. And then after the manager says, I think this is okay, only then does it go to the director of personnel's desk for signature. And another check and balance. Our director may catch something that the staff here didn't catch. And there are times I've sat with the director and said, yeah, to the letter of the reg, this is okay to do. But I questioned this. This employee did what? This looks like sexual harassment. They just want to give them a slap on the wrist with a written reprimand. I recommend you call the appointing authority and say, what's really going on here? So I just mentioned this to explain the checks and balances and emphasize that me, the director, our staff that touch discipline, we are committed to making sure it's done right the first time, because, you know, the only people that regret if disciplinary actions are overturned more than the director of personnel and their staff here are probably the lawyers that have to go to court or go to the commission for these hearings. And I said I wasn't going to make this joke. I'm not trying to be flippant, but the employment lawyers here and the director of personnel and her HR staff, we're kind of all in the same boat in that our job is to advise and counsel. And at the end of the day, no matter how well we know city rules, procedures, regulations, no matter what I know about employment law for going to school for HR degrees, and how much more the attorneys before the commission know it far better than I, all we can do is give our recommendations. And at the end of the day, if the appointing authority doesn't want to take our recommendation,
Right.
it is what it is. And I bring this up because if you feel you may be in the same boat with us, believe me, the director and I sympathize. So do the lawyers.
Thank
And
you.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Brian, and thank you, Director Gray. And I did just want to clarify that my concern was not of trust or mistrust,
Sure.
but one of public access and public accountability. I want to make sure that we give Erica Zaza enough time for the second part of this presentation. Pam, did you have a quick question for Brian or Director Gray?
Yeah, it's more of a comment to the board. First of all, the city could not be in better hands than Director Gray and Brian. Brian kept me out of trouble a lot when I was a manager in the city. Probably learned. Anyway, one part of this is incredibly time consuming if the board ever decides to go down this road. It's intense documentation. It's very intense procedure. Like Brian described, if you don't send a certified letter, you lose. I mean, those kinds of things can really be time consuming for a board like this. So it really needs to be egregious, I think. And secondly, it is never black and white. Never. I never got into a disciplinary situation that was not totally gray. I might have thought I was right, but the employees certainly thought they were right. And you're involved with high intense human behavior. And, you know, there were employees that I felt spent all of their time actively participating in not doing their job. They're very good at this. They know the rules and they know how to live within those rules. So I just put that out there for thought. If we ever get to a situation where we're all thinking, this is obviously horrible and this person needs to be fired, don't be surprised about how intense that will be. It can't just be emotion based on our opinions. It's got to be documented fact finding, documented records, and they have the right to put themselves into to go through this process. So I really appreciate you two giving us the bird's eye view of this, but there's a lot more to it.
Thanks, Pam. That's really helpful perspective. And I will pass it to you, Erica.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I just made you the host.
Okay, perfect. Let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen here. Not bad. Okay, can everybody see that? Perfect. Okay, thank you all for your time and inviting me to come here today. I'm going to be somewhat brief compared to Brian. I think I have a much smaller piece of this puzzle here. I am going to speak to you about the confidentiality specifically of law enforcement records. Let me see, how do I switch that? Okay. Just by way of background and context, my name is Erica Zaza. I am the Sunshine Law Administrator for the Police Department. I am an attorney. I was in the City Councilor's office for many years and then kind of broke off from that and started up the Sunshine Law unit of the Police Department. So we really do specialize in police records and compliance with the Missouri Sunshine Law. So my unit functions as the custodian of record for the police department. We are completely responsible for complying with the statute. I have a wonderful staff over here who reviews, redacts literally thousands of police records every year. They're experts in the subject. They do a lot of research. They're very committed to transparency and following the letter of the Sunshine Law. So I can't say enough good things about the staff over here and what a hard job they have and how great they are at doing it. The two types of police records I'm going to talk with you all about, because I think it will have some nexus with an interaction with you all as you're performing your duties as a board. And to just make you aware, I'm not going to try to train you on what all the rules are and how to determine what's an open and closed record under the statute. My goal is to just kind of make you aware that these records, what exists, what we do have, and how they're treated under the law. And that essentially how you all should be interacting with them. And like I said, there's two sort of categories. What I refer to as just traditional law enforcement records, which is what everybody kind of thinks of as police reports, things as police officers are carrying out their duties, investigating crimes, responding to calls, making arrests, gathering up evidence, all of those records that are created during that process. And then the other category are disciplinary records, complaints made by citizens to internal affairs that result in investigations by the Internal Affairs Division. And that's sort of in addition to what Brian discussed that the Department of Personnel does. I will mention that, and obviously Brian did a fabulous job. The Department of Personnel, that those records, let me start over a bit. In addition to the Department of Personnel, Internal Affairs will conduct their own investigations. And we'll get into that just a little bit more. So let's talk first about the law enforcement records. 610-100 is a provision of the Missouri Sunshine Law that speaks specifically to law enforcement records. It is unique from other provisions of the Sunshine Law, and not only does it dictate what records have to be created by law enforcement agencies, it dictates that they have to keep records of all arrests, they have to keep records of all incidents and investigative reports. It also dictates that certain records have to be considered closed. That's a little different than other parts of the Missouri Sunshine Law that says it's permissibly closed. Under 610-100, if the statute says it's closed, it cannot be disseminated. Arrest records are also included. I mention those here because there is some overview with or overlap with arrest records made by the police department, and those routinely get shared with the Department of Corrections through the central repository, Regis, and that other agencies can access that data, but it is still considered the data of the originating agency. But those often get used by other agencies as they're carrying out their duties. Okay. So the statute itself under 610-100, like I said, I'm not going to go into all the detail with you guys about what's open and what's closed, but it is dictated in the statute. when police records can be released and when they cannot be released. There's never an instance where a police report is entirely an open record. We would never release a police report to the public without some version, some at least minor redactions. Social security numbers always need to come out. Certain personally identifiable information would always need to come out. And we would never expect anyone outside of the Sunshine Law unit to make those determinations, but to just make you aware that, you know, oftentimes when the investigation is closed and done, people think, oh, it's okay to be released. We would still do some sort of review and redaction before any kind of public release. And so I do want to just emphasize that there are also criminal penalties against people who would, against individuals who would release a closed law enforcement record. So it's really, I'm just going to be like a broken record here, is don't worry sending police reports. If you have any questions about it, you know, refer back to the Sunshine Law unit, but you don't want to risk disciplinary proceedings by the Department of Personnel or criminal proceedings under this 610-115. And that's what I've highlighted there, is that please seek guidance from the Sunshine Law unit. In addition to criminal penalties under the Missouri Sunshine Law, there's another state statute for misusing criminal justice information. So when I mentioned that some of that data that gets stored with Regis is criminal justice information that may be contained with the Department of Corrections, is that information would get into other files and such, that it should not be, also not be disseminated further. There is a provision of the Missouri Sunshine Law that's the executive agency provision, which does authorize departments to share records. So if there's authority for it and the police department gives closed records to another department because they need it to conduct their business and fulfill their obligations, that they're authorized to share that information, but whether the record is further disseminated is that decision is with the originating agency. So that decision would go back to the police department to determine what could be further released. And then, like I said, I'm just going to touch on disciplinary records, make a couple points. Allegations of officer misconduct, those do go to our internal affairs division to conduct their investigations. That may also lead to a separate criminal investigation. If that is the case, there will be two separate sort of procedures being done. The internal affairs investigators will handle it and create and write their report, make their recommendation. Their investigative report will always be a closed disciplinary record under the same provisions as the Department of Personnel's records, under as a disciplinary record under the statute and city ordinance, as well as another state law that we're going to talk about in a second. And then the criminal investigation side of it, whether that gets released eventually is another it depends situation. So depending on the outcome of the investigation, portions of it may get released, but again, it would be a police report that would require at least some minimal redaction before public release. And that's, again, would be according to the provisions of 610-100. So just to reiterate what those provisions are that require disciplinary records to be closed under 021 of the Missouri Sunshine Law, section 3 and 13, it's requires closure of disciplinary records in conjunction with the city's privacy ordinance. And then I wanted to mention there's another civil service rule 19 that references a state statute that does also requires police employee disciplinary records to remain confidential, except to the extent they need to be shared with the Civil Service Commission. The Civil Service Commission then is required to maintain that confidentiality. So there's sort of another layer of protection of police disciplinary records in the city. So just a summary of sort of what the records that we create, investigative reports related to employee discipline. There may be an internal investigative report as well as a criminal investigation completed. The records are closed and should not be shared outside of the Civil Service Commission, and any questions or if public requests for access to police records should always be directed back to the police department. And you can and feel free to contact me. And my contact information is there. And like I said, we're always happy to help. And a lot of these things just kind of come up as a case by case situation. So we get kind of weird cases all the time and situations. And there's a lot of statutory interpretation as far as what needs to be, what's released and what's open and what's closed. So, but we're happy to help if you guys have any questions.
Thank you, Erica. Could you and Brian both send your slides, if possible, to our staff?
Sure.
Sure. Chair, who would you like that sent to?
Who is best for that, Ruby? Yourself or?
I would be pleased to receive these wonderful slides.
Aw. Thank you, Ms. Bonner.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Ruckelman. Good to see you again.
It's great to see you as well.
Board, are there any questions for Erica?
No, Chair, I'd just like to say, I think that it was pretty clear. I guess one at the end, Erica, where it talks about disciplinary records, is that they're the only entity that can request them is civil service? I just want to be clear. Because
Yeah,
I
that's a good question. I think in order for us to share disciplinary records, there needs to be statutory authority or a rule or an ordinance authorizing that. And I think that's because of that state law, which says they should only be shared with the Civil Service Commission. And I think what they've done under Rule 19 is said, in certain situations, you can share that information with the Citizen Oversight Board.
Right.
So in that scenario, then obviously the records can be shared, but there does need to be some sort of groundwork kind of in place in order for that information to be shared. Otherwise, it's a violation of that state statute.
Have you had an opportunity to look at the ordinance that created the Detention Facility Oversight Board? And if so, does it appear in that ordinance to give authority to the board to receive disciplinary records?
I have briefly reviewed it. I have not analyzed it to that extent. And that would definitely be something for the city councilor's office. Since I'm not in the capacity as an attorney advisor anymore.
Right.
My role is pretty limited, but I do think that's a good question and something as you guys continue on with what you're doing is something that probably needs to be addressed.
Okay. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Reverend Gray, if you could remember to put that question in the letter to the city councilor's office, that'd be great.
You sure giving me an awful lot of work, Chair. All right, I put that on.
Pam?
I'm sorry, but I can't figure out how to put my little hand up any other way. my question involves access to an investigation. So we were told at one point several months ago that the police department was investigating the deaths in the correctional facility. And then we never heard any more about it. And I'm sure that would involve disciplinary action, personnel records of corrections officers, not police necessarily. But is there a way to get access to those investigations, even if it's got names and stuff redacted? Just so we could kind of see, you know, how do we request that? How do we go about? I mean, and the answer may be no, but
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're probably talking about the FIU investigations into the use of force investigations done by the Force Investigative Unit. I think until that investigation is complete and they know where that's going to lead, you probably would not be able to have access to those reports.
okay.
Once the investigation is finalized and a charging decision has been made, or there's an outcome, then it's possible you may be able to get them. Operationally as a board, I'm not sure what the best way to request those and how to get those would be done. You know, that's something I'd be certainly happy to try to help facilitate over here.
Okay,
I'm not,
I was just
I
curious.
think
if
there's
there was
other
a
boards that
process.
have had direct sort of contact with our investigators over that, but I think it's a timing issue. So I think eventually, probably yes, you could have access to some of that.
Okay,
I,
thank you.
I think that would be at least partially the role of our staff to request those records. And it sounds like check in to see when the investigation would be complete.
Chair, can I just piggyback, and I'm sorry, just off of what Pam asked? The police investigation, from my understanding, is not specific to quote unquote allegations of use of force. It may be, I mean, for us, just as an example, if there are 5 or 6 deaths that have occurred, and use of force might be an allegation, but another allegation might be overdose. Another allegation might be suicide. So I guess to extend Pam's question, any death that occurs within the detention facility, it doesn't necessarily have to be use of force or allegation of use of force. Does the police investigate all of those deaths? And would that investigation, is still, I guess, the same question, Pam, what would be the process of getting the findings of that investigation, regardless of how the death occurs? Pam, does that make any questions? Does that expand your?
Yeah, I was curious just about, we haven't gotten a lot of information about this at all, but at one point we were told that we would not be investigating the deaths because the police department was doing so.
Right.
And then that was it. All right. So I don't know what the police are investigating. I don't know how many investigations they have going. There were 5 deaths. I'm assuming somebody's looking into all of those. And, you know, just a status report would be nice, even if we can't get the details yet.
Mm-hmm.
6, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's my understanding that the death, if there is a death that occurs on city property, then yes, the police, well, at least even if it's a non-criminal situation, it is still documented with a report. I think it depends on the circumstances of how detailed those investigations are. But I do believe there is at least a minimal sort of police report written. Those you can always like basic police incident reports are always searchable by the victim's name, and those can be requested. The basic sort of bare bones information is always available to the public. So if you have you know, again, operationally, I'm not sure how it would work, but you can always request, like, I want to know if there's a report, an incident for this individual, and if you have the names of the deceased individuals. I mean, we can always release basic information that say, yes, we are investigating this as a non-criminal incident.
Right.
Or something. So basic information is always available.
Thank
If
you.
if it is being investigated. I have not seen a situation. I take it back. I've seen one situation where someone did die, but they died later at the hospital after, kind of after the fact, that initially the police did not investigate. So I think for the most part, they should be investigating if they're notified of deaths that occur within the facilities.
Could we have a member of staff request an update on each of the 6 deaths and their investigations?
I don't recall that we ever even got the names of the victims.
I have the names. I could send them. Actually,
Okay.
I can tell them to you right now. It's public
Okay.
information.
Then certainly, Erica, I'll be in
Mhm.
touch.
Okay.
Do you want the names now, or should I email you?
Please email me.
Okay.
You can maintain minimal confidentiality at this point.
Okay. Okay, are there any other questions on this?
No, this has been great.
Okay, sounds good. I believe our next, and you'll be taking point on this again, right? But I believe our next meeting is going to be the first Monday of August, and it sounds like you want it to be just a training.
Yeah, that was, and I love, of course, I'd love to get direction from the rest of the board members if anybody disagrees. I think that based upon what we've requested tonight, if we have to change that to include receiving information, we can always do that. But if the board is agreeable, I think all of us would agree that the information tonight was very useful, very helpful, very necessary. And we want to get this, the rest of this training in as soon as possible. And I'll be very blunt about why I think that's important. If we have board members who end up getting, let's say, all 11 trainings, I'm going to say this, it'll make it a little bit, it might make it easier for the Public Safety Committee and or the mayor's office to retain board members versus changing board members, if depending on how much training board members have. And so I'm being very selfish about that as a member of this board. I came in with all of you and like to get as far through this process with all of you as possible. And so as much training as we can get under our belt, it makes us more effective as a unit. And so I'm being selfish, Chair, about trying to get all that training in as quickly as possible. So from where I sit, the training would be the priority, but that would be based upon what other information comes in, based upon what we've discussed tonight between now and that meeting time.
Sure. And while we have Nicole on here, Nicole, do you know what will be the topic of the August 7th training?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Also, thank you to the trainers, the staff, and the board for this training tonight. I really appreciate everyone being available, and I hope that the board sees that we really worked hard to put together a comprehensive confidentiality training for you all, and hoping that this is useful in the work that you all have ahead of you. I just wanted to reiterate one thing, that we're still missing just a critical part of this training, I would still highly recommend the 15 minutes for a closed session so that the city council's office could deliver the confidentiality training portion that was requested of them as well. But the next training we had scheduled were city employee rights under the Constitution and state and federal laws.
And Chair, can I ask, only because I guess I'll be chair at that time, those two presentations, do you see them? Because tonight, and our chair has done a great job. We started, so we're looking at more realistically, not an hour, but an hour and a half based upon the potential of questions. So I think we're realistically saying that we need a minimum of an hour and probably on average an hour and a half to do that, just so that we can plan the agenda accordingly. So Chair, that seems to be about right.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, I think it'll depend on what the next, the hour figure came from this specific set of presentations. And so, yeah.
All right.
It'll depend.
And we'll circle back around, Nicole, on the confidentiality module. We'll circle back around on that.
Thank you. And I will try to work with the next set of trainers to, see how long the portion is, so I can let you all know what the time frame looks like. We set an hour for tonight aside to try to deliver this to you all in an hour. So to be mindful of everyone's time. And I know there's always a lot of questions. So very happy to help, push the trainings forward that you all need.
Yeah.
Okay, I will hear a motion to adjourn unless there's anything else.
So move.
Second?
I'm calling you tonight, Chair. I'm calling
Do we
you
have a
tonight.
second?
Second.
We'll do a voice vote. All in favor, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say no. See you August 7th.
Thank you so much. I'll give you a call. We'll set up a meeting.
Good night.
Aye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.